Robb Stark is one of the most tragic characters in Game of Thrones, but I would argue that the TV show fully misses the point of what makes him a tragic character. The show portrays Robb as this gifted young commander who's brilliant at war and has a love story for the ages, who falls in love, it's a Romeo and Juliet situation, and that ultimately leads to his untimely demise, and that's the tragedy of it all. But I would argue that Robb's storyline in the books is even more tragic as it ties into the theme of children being ruined by war, by being hurt by war, and that being one of the big effects of war on a society. Don't forget, if you want to hear me talk about the books at length, there's a whole podcast for that. I did long form because y'all wanted that. It's in the places with the links. You know where to look. This theme is very prevalent in the books, but gets kind of squeezed out of the TV show because we age up all of these characters, including the adults. Because remember, Ned Stark, Robert Baratheon, all of that generation of people, when they had Robert's Rebellion, the first war, they were all teenagers at the time. They were all teenagers that were fundamentally altered and traumatized by the atrocities that they had to participate in. And so this second war, the second rebellion, the War of the Five Kings, is showing that process happening all over again with the next generation. And one of the big victims of that is Robb Stark. Because remember, in the books, Robb is not this gorgeous man up here. He is a boy. At the beginning of Game of Thrones, the book, he is 14, about to turn 15, and by the time we get to the end of the book, he's 15, is crowned king in the north, and then has a whole war to fight. And all the events that transpired between that point in time and the Red Wedding is only about a year and a half, meaning by the time Robb Stark meets his untimely end, he is 16 years old. And the fact that he is only 15, 16 during the entire course of this series, I think is very important to his character. It makes sense. His actions make a lot more sense in the context of a 15, 16-year-old boy, in a leadership position than it does, a man who is, young, but still very much an adult. And I find this somewhat frustrating because what the show ultimately does in switching around, how his love story unfolds is it makes Robb very culpable. It makes him the source of the blame because really he made a dumb decision in the context of the show. Instead of fulfilling the marriage pact that he had promised, he just, falls in love and our love is too strong and we can't let it go. So he marries her anyway and says, screw the world, true love is the most important thing. And then, we know how it turns out. Meanwhile, in the books, it's his youth that is to blame. It's his worldview that has been, limited by his lack of experience and his, very, very almost like simple understanding of what right and wrong is. So in the book, he doesn't marry Talisa from the TV show. He marries a girl from Westeros. Her name is Jane Westerling. She comes from a noble house in the Westerlands who are under Tywin Lannister, which immediately tells you that there is maybe something wrong here, because why is Robb going off and marrying someone who is a subject of the Lannisters? Well, allow me to explain. When Robb is doing the whole army thing, as, the 16-year-old boy wonder, he travels to the Westerlands. They're attacking Tywin on his home turf, and they end up taking one castle known as the Crag. The Crag is the seat of House Westerling, a very old house from the Westerlands. And in the midst of taking that castle, he gets injured. He takes an arrow, I think, to the shoulder, and then it gets a little infected, and they have to deal with it and take care of him. And it's at this point that the Westerlings, who are now, hosting Robb Stark against their will, start encouraging their daughter Jane to go care for him. Specifically, Jane's mother, Sybil, really pushes her daughter and is like, yep, go take care of him, go be helpful, go do the thing. And Jane is sweet. Jane isn't up to any nonsense. She is also a 16-year-old and is just, trying to be helpful. And so you have this 16-year-old boy who is injured, who is tired, who has been emotionally drained from fighting a war, which he is not prepared for, as we frequently see as he breaks down from time to time, because again, he's a teenager. He's a teenager who's been saddled with all this crazy responsibility and is now seeing all of this death and destruction on the daily. But he, in that mental state, now weakened by an injury and being taken care of by Jane Westerling, he lets his guard down a little bit. And then we get the kicker. There, in the midst of all of this stuff going on, Robb receives the news that Theon took Winterfell and then burned the whole thing down, and that Bran and Rickon are dead. They're not, but he thinks they are. And so, in the depths of his sorrow, in the midst of his trauma from all this war stuff and all the pressures of all this responsibility, and probably, being hopped up on milk of the poppy that old Sybil Westerling is really pushing, Robb and Jane sleep with each other. And then upon waking up, Robb is a mess because Robb has been raised by Eddard Stark, by Ned Stark, to be honorable, to be a Stark, to do the right thing at all times. But here he is having done something wrong. He took this young girl's virginity and in the context of this society, effectively kind of ruined her life and or prospects going forward. And so at that point, he has a choice to make. He can either save her honor and therefore his honor by marrying her and making it so, there isn't a problem, that he hasn't ruined her life for her, and, he now has a wife, yay. Or he can do the politically intelligent thing and say, I'm really sorry, I'm already promised to a fray, there's nothing I can do. But herein lies the rub. The intelligent thing to do is dishonorable. If he does the politically smart thing and says, sorry, I'm already promised to a fray, there's nothing I can do for you anymore, I'm sorry we did this, then he has not lived up to the ideals that his father set in him, and he's possibly knocked up this girl on top of dishonoring her, and therefore brought possibly another bastard into the world who, mind you, he has grown up with Jon Snow. He has seen how bastards are treated differently, and he doesn't want to, inflict that upon anyone else. And while these are all good and kind instincts, they are the instincts of a child. They are the instincts of a younger person who doesn't fully understand the harsh realities of the world. As much as he would have wanted to help her, there wasn't really anything that he could do there that wouldn't have horrible consequences down the road. But because he's young, because he's haunted by this specter of his father, and, the image of what the honorable man looks like, he does the dumb thing. He says, I will marry you. I will quickly marry you so that we can fix this situation because I did something bad and I need to take responsibility for my actions. He is thinking small scale. He is thinking about honor and right and wrong instead of seeing the world in the shades of gray that it really does exist in. And so yes, while the decision is dumb in the sense of he is making a decision that's going to lead to bad things later, it makes sense in the context of the character and it fits within the themes of the story, which is again, how these wars affect everyone, specifically children, how it ruins these children by putting too much responsibility on them, by, turning them into adults too quickly, by traumatizing them, and by making them make decisions when their brains are not fully functional enough to do so. A 16-year-old making this type of dumb decision after he has been inexplicably put in a leadership position makes total sense. Versus the TV show, which just turned it into this oh, our love is so strong that I'm going to say, screw it, fuck the world, and I don't care about the consequences because right now I need you. And this just feels like such a slap in the face to the character, because I feel like the character, his point is meant to be that he has too much put on him, that there is no way for him to win, versus the Robb of the TV show, which is shown as capable, as mostly being able to handle it, then suddenly just throwing it away for nothing because he's dumb. There's interesting commentary on the effects of war, how it traumatizes, affects the psyche, and whether power should be concentrated in such few hands is all just kind of thrown away for a love story trope that I feel like we've seen 1,000 times. The Robb Stark of the books is ultimately a victim. He's a victim of circumstance, he's a victim of this society, and so when he makes a decision that does lead to his untimely end, I don't blame him because I don't understand how a child in this position is meant to, make these huge decisions. I don't expect a 16-year-old to fully comprehend the consequences of his actions, and so when those consequences are bad, I still ultimately feel for him. Versus the show, where basically from the moment he decides to say fucking and get married, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Anyway, in the comments, let me know what character you want me to do a deep dive on for next Saturday. Y'all are cool. Have a good night. Bye.